Me.
Dun, dun, dun. Yay, brother. I never get to hear him perform nearly enough, so I figured, command performance. You don't mind?
No, not at all.
Alright.
Hi, I'm Torvald. Welcome to my home.
Woo!
As she said, I do tell stories. I think most of you already know that. It's called the Viking Home Companion, and I've been doing it for several years now. I do shows mostly at Pennsic Gulf Force now. I don't do a whole lot of traveling, but if there are folks nearby that would like me to come over for an event or for anything like this, I'm more than happy to come and do that too. My stories are all based on actual Norse culture, history, mythology, and I throw my own little twist into them. So, let's see, Heather wanted to hear one from Midgard Mayhem. Trying to remember though, which ones were on that one.
I like them all.
Okay, well then we'll just,
Pick one you like.
okay, so, alright, how about we do the Varangian Guard? Okay, everybody here know who the Varangian Guard was? The Varangian Guard were the personal bodyguard of the Emperor of Byzantium, and they were Norsemen. They were Vikings that came from Rus, from Kiev, from Sweden, from Norway, even included some Anglo-Saxons who after 1066 didn't want to bow down to William, so they went to run and work for him. But this is an exaggerated story that is absolute truth, I know, because I was there. Everybody knows that Bjarki, he's the champion axe scratcher of the whole village. A lot of people don't know why. You see, Norseman being, but Norseman is, Bjarki liked to go a Viking. The only problem was he wouldn't tell his wife Hildy when he was a-going and when he was coming back. So he'd walk in through the front door of his hall, Hildy, I'm home, and there goes her axe. Now, berserks aren't known for being all that smart. He was smart enough not to throw it back. He wasn't really worried about whether she could catch it, he just didn't want to give her anything else to throw at him. The thing was, though, that things used to be pretty exciting back in the village, before they had built the new Berserker Longhouse, where we keep all the guys up in there now, so they don't cause so much trouble. But because it had gotten, to the point where you could walk right out the front door of your long hall into the middle of an axe-catching contest, whether you wanted to play or not. So anyway, after they built the new Berserker Longhouse, things had gotten pretty quiet, and they got a little dull, so we decided we all wanted to go to Viking. So we all went down and piled into Halfdan's longboat, and we decided we didn't want to go over to England that year. We've been raiding them so often, there weren't a whole lot of Saxon villages left. Probably because we had this habit of burning them down when we're done. So we decided we'd give them a year or two to recover, and then maybe they'd be worth raiding again. So we decided to go east instead. Now we all piled into the longboat, we headed on over there, and we went over to Novgorod. And we was having such a good time over there, right up until the Berserks got bored and started teaching some of the locals how to play axe catching, and we had to leave town pretty quick after that. We did pick up one new crewman though. Called him Oli, because after he played axe catching with Bjarki, he only had one ear. It made his helmet kind of funny when we went into battle, but anyway, we still didn't want to go home. So we were going to go on down to Byzantium. Now the problem is, to get down to Byzantium, there isn't one river that goes straight on down there. You actually have to portage over to a couple of other rivers to make it all down there. And let me tell you, if you ain't never portaged a longboat, that's an adventure all on its own. The first thing you got to do is you got to take your boat and you pull it up onto the beach. Then you go cut down some trees to make some logs. Then you shove the logs up under the front of the boat. Then you tie a rope under the front of the boat and you pull it up onto the logs. Now you've got guys in the front pulling on the rope, you got guys in the back pushing on the boat, and when the log rolls out the back, you run it around to the front again. Yeah.
What could go wrong?
So we got the boat up on the logs. Most of us are up in front pulling on the rope. Got the berserks in the back pushing, because they're the big guys, right? But that rope was awful slippery, so we kind of let go of it to spit in our hands to get a better grip on it, and well, Berserks got an extra bath that year. Lucky for us, we'd already locked up their axes in the sea chest before we got started, so they couldn't do much more than yell at us. But we did finally manage to make it all the way down there to Byzantium. But you know what? Them Byzantines, they got no sense of humor. I mean, you pillage one village, you burn one church, and the next thing you know, you got the whole bloody army chasing you around down there. Now, we let them around for a little while, had a pretty good time. Every once in a while, we'd slow down so they could catch up to us and let the berserks work off their nerves in the back there. But then they finally got us. Got us up on top of this hill, surrounded on every side. 5,000 of them and 200 of us. We had them right where we wanted them. We just turned the berserks loose and had a party for a little while. But you know that Byzantine emperor, he got no more sense of humor than the rest of them does. He finally pulled everybody back. came out waving this big white flag. He didn't know what it meant, but we figured we'd go out and talk to him. He said, "Boys, you're awful impressive. How'd you like to come and work for me and be part of my personal bodyguard?" "Okay, well, what's the pay?" He said, "Well, if you come work for me, I'll give you all the beer you can drink. I'll give you all the food you can eat. I'll give you gold. I'll give you women." Ooh, that sounds pretty good. But, what if you don't want to take the job? He said, "Well, I just can't afford to lose any more troops to you, so I'll just have to pull everybody back, shoot you full of arrows." Okay, we did have to stop and think about that. Well, we stood there for a couple of minutes, and he finally looked over at us and said, "Okay, boys, I've got to have an answer." Well, we drew up rank upon rank, shield upon shield. We raised our axes, we raised our spears, we looked him right in the eye and said, "Yeah, sure, you betcha." And believe it or not, that is actually sort of kind of how it happened. What had happened was, of course, is that the Swedish Rus, Norsemen, had come down and they had conquered Novgorod and Kiev and established a pretty good-sized, strong kingdom up there. And they started raiding down into Byzantium. And the Byzantines learned pretty fast they just were not a match for the Norsemen. They were bigger, they were stronger, and they just didn't care. And so after a while, under the best of traditions, if you can't beat them, buy them. And so he finally sent an emissary up to Kiev, to the Prince of Kiev, and said, "Hey, I'd like to hire a bunch of your guys to come down and work for me. They'll be part of my bodyguard, and they will form an elite unit in the Byzantine army." Well, the problem is, up there in Kiev, the prince had all these berserks and Norsemen who were bored out of their minds and were causing problems for him. What better way to get rid of them than to sell them to the Emperor of Byzantium, essentially? And that is how it basically got started.
That's odd. I didn't actually know that. That's
Yes.
Cool. Yay. And they stayed favored.
They were. They served several campaigns. Very large. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous Varangian commanders ever was King Harald Hardrada.
Really?
That was where he earned his wealth before he went back and made his bid to take over Norway.
And tried to be, wow. Ah, there you go. Yay!
Oh yeah. One of the great benefits of being in the Varangian Guard is whenever the emperor died, you had the right to pillage the palace.
Hey, nice. I think they made that up.
Yeah.
Who was gonna stop that was ever written?
Who was going to stop them?
Well, exactly. Yeah. They already lived there, right?
You want to get the one in front of you?
No. No.
Well, hi everybody. Thank you. That was awesome.
Make it faster.
I think I've met most of you. In fact, everybody, I think. Okay? Can I give you that? Oh, hi. Okay, well here then, I want to start off with something that gets everybody singing. You guys know the whole Bardic thing is that it's not Bardic until everybody's singing at least once. So this is a song that I learned in North Carolina, which is where we're headed tomorrow. It's called The Farmer's Cursed Wife. It's all about being very careful what you wish for. So you'll catch the refrain, it's fine. Well, there was an old farmer lived over the hill. If he ain't moved on, he's living there still. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie days. Now the devil came to him one day. He said, "What of your kin I'm gonna take away. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie days." This is mandatory, so again. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day. Beautiful.
I think they've heard this.
I think I know him. He said, "Please don't take my only son. There's work on the farm that's gotta be done. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day. Oh, but you can have my nagging wife. I swear by God, she's the curse of my life. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day. Singing bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day. So they marched on down to the gates of hell. He said, "Kick up the fire, boys, we'll roast her well. Bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day." So out came a little demon with a spitting chain, but she up with her foot and she knocked out his brain, singing bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie day. Singing bye, bye, diddle-lie, bye, bye, diddle-lie any longer, she'd have tore up hell. Firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. Singing firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. Well, you know that old man jumped and he bit his tongue. Then he ran for the hills in a flat-out run. Firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. He was heard to yell as he ran o'er the hill. The devil won't have her, but damned if I will. Singing firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. Singing firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. There goes the riff. Singing firefly diddle-lie, firefly diddle-lie day. I always think like jazz hands at the end, but I feel that's a little much, right? Jazz hands. Well, where shall we go? Awesome.
Where it says.
Oh, that changed my list on me without telling me. Hold on. Oh, yay.
I did tell you.
Well,
I just didn't tell you what I told changed it to.
technicalities.
I had this crazy idea that you were literate.
Well, they're only like short forms of the song. So that
music
makes
ninja instead of pine ninja.
it well, music ninja. Like
Change to keyword looking.
how many of you are skating? Everybody? Anybody who is not? Okay, that's good. It just changes the stories because I can like talk about, you know, royalty and stuff and, you know, people are okay with that. This is actually a song from when we were visiting out in Runtallen, which is Halifax, Nova Scotia. We were out there. I went to one of the events, and there's actually a picture of me on the cover of The Hidden Path, one of my live albums. That is me with the Cheshire Dragon. It's this beautiful, like huge red sea unicorn, and they bring him out to their events, and they make sure he's sitting on this, you know, on the side of the whatever's closest to the sea, which is kind of adorable. So, anyways, I was singing some stuff out there, and this old story came to mind. And it not only has a cute story, but there's a bad joke that goes with it too, which I can tell you. The story is basically a mother and son every morning, to start their day, would walk hand in hand along the water's edge. Nice. Hold on a second. You have a grandfather's pocket? Sorry. Clocks are neat. Squirrel, they tell time and everything. Time, did I mention I'm sleep deprived today? So anyways, mother and son walking every morning along the water's edge, just to start their day. They just, you know, walk with a little bit of time in the water, a little bit of time up on the sand. Well, one day, the little boy, without telling his mother, dropped her hand and marched up the beach to pick something up. And he took this thing very carefully, very solemnly, down to the water's edge, and he threw it in. The mother wondered why he kept doing this day after day after day. She finally put it together. He was collecting things that had been left behind when the tide had rolled out. Things that didn't quite make it back into the ocean. Little fish in rock pools, bits of seaweed, pretty shells. He would pick them up and give them a lift home. Now she watched that with a smile on her face for years, and he got taller and bolder and kept doing this morning after morning. And one day he got too bold. He walked too far out into this water, and a riptide grabbed his feet and started to pull him out to sea. Not good. So she was ready to dive in, but before she did, wouldn't you know it, big wave picks the little guy up, very solemnly, very gently throws him back up on the shore, because that's where he belonged. So I always like that story. It's just, you never know what the world will give back. So, you know, always just give when you can. And we were playing this in Long Island, and a guy came up and said, "Oh, I know that story. My grandma used to tell it. Different ending, though. Mother and son walking along the water's edge. He gets swept out to sea. Well, in this case, she drops to her knees and says, 'Oh, God, don't take my son from me. Don't take him. He's my everything, my whole world. Don't take him from me.' And wouldn't you know it, a big wave picks the little guy up, throws him back on the sand. And she goes, 'Ahem, he had a hat.'" Take whatever grammar lesson for this week. This is our version. It's called Fisherman's Boy. Fisherman's boy with a bucket of water goes walking each day on the shore, looking in tide pools and crannies for fish that were stranded. Sure-handed he'd gather them all, throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. Throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. So soon he was throwing the nets like his father and hauling them back to the shore, but taking the time to be careful and sort the unneeded from those he would stow in the hold, and throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. Throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. He went down in a storm near the rocks of Point Clary. They searched till the night drove them home. But in the morning they found him alive and unnevered, where shattered wood littered the stone. He'd been thrown back from the ocean, back to the living once more. And so, fisherman's boy with a son and a daughter goes walking each day on the shore, looking in tide pools and crannies for fish that were stranded. Sure-handed they gather them all, throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. Throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. Throwing them back to the ocean, back to the living once more. There. See if I can get mine. There we go. Oh, hey. Since this is here, a lot of you are probably on my newsletter list by email. But if you're not, every couple of weeks, every month, every couple of months, I send out a notice to say what crazy projects we're working on and where we're going to be and that sort of thing. So if you are not sure you're on the list or would like to be on the list, just a name and email address. I know you guys are.
I clearly fell off it because I didn't find out about this
Oh,
until
okay.
last week.
Well, great. Okay. Then we'll have.
And then it was
to
like,
get back on.
what? Rearrange everything.
Oh, I'm glad you guys came. Thank you. But yeah, just a name and email address, and we're very careful with the list; it doesn't get shared with anybody. So, let's go north. Because
it's not cold enough.
Well, this will make this feel warm. This is from the Arctic, actually. It's a tale that
Thank
my
you.
dad-
Yeah, you're
Actually, it was colder in Thunder Bay than Iqaluit the other day. So that's kind of mean to the people in Thunder Bay, like our drummer, John, who lives there. It's a tale that my dad brought back when he was working up in Nunavut, the northernmost territory in Canada. He was up in Iqaluit, which is the legislative center of what is primarily an Inuit culture territory. It's actually pretty neat up there. And Dad was working with a lot of locals, and one of the things he was given permission to do was to go into the schools and listen when the elders of the community came in and chatted with the youngsters and told some of the tales of their heritage. This was a beautiful and yet really harsh story, which, you know, that's life in the north. But it talked about Sedna. Now, Sedna was a beautiful Inuit girl. And one day she and her father went out across the empty ocean in a double kayak, each with their own paddle. Now in those days, the ocean had no life. It was just blackness beneath and ice on the surface. And so the presence of this moving boat attracted the attention of a storm who lived on the far horizon. Well, curious, as storms are, it came and started to swirl around the little craft, churning the waves around this new toy it had found. Well, sensing their danger, they turned, Sedna and her father, and started to make for the safety of the far harbor. Now, Sedna had a great heart, and so she put all of her strength behind every stroke of the paddle, but her father was cowardly and craven. He looked back and he thought to himself, this boat would go faster if it was lighter. And without warning, he reached back, he grabbed his daughter, and he threw her into the icy sea. Now that could have been the end of the tale, but it wasn't. Sedna had such a great heart. She swam behind the boat and grabbed a hold and wouldn't let it advance. Her father panicked. He grabbed the paddle and started to hit her fingers to make them release, but she refused. And she wouldn't have. But finally, the terrible cold turned her fingers into clear icicles. And with one tap, the ice shattered and she fell fingerless down into the deep with these little shards twinkling after. Now that could have been the end of the tale, but it wasn't. Because Sedna had such a great heart, she looked around herself in the empty blackness and she thought, if this is to be my new home, I don't want to be alone. So with a force of will, she turned each one of those fingers into a new animal that had never existed before. They became the first seals, walrus, whales, all the creatures, all of her children who still live with her in the deep. Sedna roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Sedna roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. From her hands they fell, children of the ocean swell, with ice's twinkle inside. She offered them a name, and seals they all became, and laughing took a coat of dappled light. Sedna roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Sedna roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. From her hands they fell, ever in the sea to dwell, nimble-fingered, quick and lithe. She offered them a name, and daughters they became, keepers of her secrets in the eyes. Sedna roams the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Sedna roams the deep,
I just
Well, what's next on our magic list of
Angela.
things? Yeah, come sit down. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so 2 gigantic projects underway right now. Not including the 7-week tour that takes us all the way around the perimeter of the United States, because we're crazy. Let's see. The first one is an audiobook. I've got a book actually that I wrote quite a few years ago. It started out as a collection of short stories of me telling the tales of the King Arthur characters. You know, Lancelot and Guinevere and Gawain and all these, Merlin and all these folks. And I would send them out, this was years ago, I would send them out one at a time to my mailing list, the newsletter list. And then I compiled them into a book, which also has all of the sheet music for all of my King Arthur songs for people to sing along and stuff. And finally, and I've been wanting to do this for years, we just finished an audiobook version of this with a soundtrack, with an instrumental soundtrack of us playing original music inspired by some King Arthur stuff, and some is very, you know, tied to the stories. So the audiobook is coming out tomorrow, the next day. And the only way to get it right yet is to pop over to heatherdale.com, and I'm running a fundraising campaign for another huge project that I want to do called Celtic Avalon. I'm working on a stage show, like a big stage show, you know, like a half dozen musicians, big lights, big costumes, the whole thing based on King Arthur legends. And we're running a huge fundraising campaign for it, so if you pop by heatherdale.com, any donation of $20 or more gets you the audiobook, and then there's lots of other neat goodies for, you know, exclusive stuff, and just to thank you for supporting the fundraising drive. So that's those are the 2 big things in my world at the moment. I'm a little daunted, frankly, by, you know, the fundraising, because I'm Canadian and it's hard to say, can you help me? You know, I'll just go back and work harder, I'm sorry. But this is our 10th year of touring. We have been solidly touring, like at least 100 shows a year, all self-booked, like we do everything ourselves, for a decade. And Celtic Avalon has been on the books for a long time, and we've been saving and saving and saving, and we're so close. And the fundraising drive is so that this year we can make it happen and have it out touring by next year. So, you know, if you're interested, pop by the website and go get yourself an audiobook, which is kind of fun. So, this is a King Arthur song. It is one of the most recent King Arthur songs that I've written, because it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to say with this one. It's quite a complicated story. I mean, it's about 500-600 years old. And it talks about Sir Gawain, who is the wild child of Camelot. I love him. He is this reckless, brave, bold, brash, loud-laughing, loud-fighting boy from the north. He's a prince. Yeah, exactly. He's a prince of the pagan Orkney Isles, so he is schooled in the old ways. And one day at Arthur's keep, the doors open, and who should stride into the hall but the Green Man himself? This knight dressed and colored green from the tips of his hair right down to his boots. His horse is green, his armor is green, his giant double-bladed axe is green. And he is the forest god. He is the divine in nature. This is the old Celtic blood made flesh. Now, instead of saying good things about King Arthur, the Green Knight doesn't like what he sees in this new Camelot and starts insulting everyone. And everybody is just like, until Gawain says, you don't do that to my people, and you certainly don't do that to my friend the king. And he goes up and he challenges the Green Man himself to a duel to the death. And he knows perfectly well who this is. So for a year, they chase each other around the countryside, never quite meeting. And Gawain goes on a number of other little side quests and side hauntings and temptations, and he overcomes them all. And for the rest of his life, he wears a green belt or a green sash to remind himself about what he learned on this quest of the Green Knight about faith and loyalty. So this is the tale of Sir Gawain. New Year's Day, dawning wet on Britain's shore, all roused by a pounding on the door. A giant knight dressed in green, never seen before, hefts an axe and holds it high and lets a challenge roar. You craven men may fear dishonor, but you fear my vengeance more. For that's fear that chills you like a wraith, and it's doubt you gird about your waists. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. Sir Gawain, pagan prince of northern isles, he shouted, "Shame on you, brothers, on your silence." He took the axe and struck his blow and brought the giant low. He raised his head and held it high and met the giant's eye and cried, "I'll meet your vengeance in a year. We'll see who'll die, you or I." For that's fear that chills you like a wraith, and it's doubt you gird about your waist. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. Summer gone, so Gawain leaves him on his quest with a 5-point star, a sign of faith upon his chest. He seeks his foe, travels west, not knowing where to go. There's no clue until a baroness has offered aid to show, but only if he stays as guest within her bower 3 days, no less. Oh, that's fear that chills you like a wraith, and it's doubt you gird about your waist. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. Well, she plays the maid, but vain the baroness's hope. For Gawain's not swayed, another lady holds his own. She offers body, offers land, but each advance is spurned. So she puts a belt into his hand, a gift of magic earned by constancy in face of all temptation to his given word. Now that's fear that chills you like a wraith, but this is hope you gird about your waist. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. So New Year's Day, dawning wet on Pretend's shore, and Gawain meets that same green knight once more. A man laughs and gives his hand instead of Charon's feet. Gawain at last perceives his God and lands a reverent deed. Take it where my lady's belt, the green man gladly cries. See to it you serve us well in all the paths of life. Constant and be faithful, and wear that belt for all to see. That a man came here for justice, and left here blessed by me. He left here blessed by me. Left here blessed by me.
I thought you were saying Hawkwind.
No, I said
really not
smoking.
sure.
Like your fingers are
Not
on
sure
fire.
Why you were saying
You
Hawkwind.
Hawkwind. I don't know if any of you are like psychedelic rock band aficionados. There was a very sort of seminal British space rock outfit called Hawkwind. What about 1960s kind of early-ish?
They're still playing.
Yeah, they are. Well, the surviving members are still playing, but one of Ben's first gigs when he moved to England, before he came back to Canada, was playing in the Assassins of Silence, which is a Hawkwind tribute act, like complete with belly dancers and like psychedelic light shows and all sorts of stuff. And you were playing flute and saxophone in a fiddle in a space rock band that had more members of Hawkwind in it. Yeah, I know, seriously, than Hawkwind was.
It was pretty good. There was in the summer of 2003, Hawkwind threw their annual invite-only summer picnic, and they decided that year that they didn't feel like playing, so they hired us to do it instead. It was a very Pink Floyd The Wall kind of moment.
I'm not too sure too many of the people in the audience would care. They're like, yeah, it's the music, it's fine.
Yeah.
So this is a song we always do at Christmas time, but we like sneaking it in the rest of the time of year. Because it is actually just gorgeous. It is a 15th century tune. Don't make me go all Pie Ninja on you. There we go, alright. The poker here. Don't hurt the flute, don't hurt the flute.
No, the poker's behind him.
Don't encourage him, he's got an axe back there. So this is a period French tune. 16th century or 15th century, I'll have to check the liner notes, but the French tune is called La Jeune Pucelle, and the lyrics are just squeaky post-period. They're 1643, and they were written by a Jesuit missionary living in Sainte-Marie among the Hurons, which is up in Ontario. Still quite a strongly native community. And Father Jean, of course, arrives in the spirit of I'm going to tell you all about my faith, and realizes as he joins this new community that they have their own ways of doing things, and they see this strange new man show up, and they were kind enough to listen to him, but he wasn't getting any common ground. There was no way for him to learn about them, there was no way for them to learn about him, their language wasn't even the same. So he did something that I think was surprisingly humble, particularly for the time, is rather than trying to get them to learn French, he started learning Huron. And so as he started to write down in a dictionary, which we still have, the manuscript of this is still extant, he learns word by word the language of his new community. As he gets enough words together, he starts writing them songs. And so he lets the music carry them closer together so they can start to understand each other. So I'll sing this in Wendat, which is the Huron language, as it was first written. Then there's a translation into French, which would have been Father Jean's native tongue. And finally there is an English translation. This is known as the Huron Carol. Here's a Satonya, here's a Satonya, here's a Satonya, here's a Satonya, here's the Nyayam Teton, here's a Satonya, Annawa Tewaru Kinon Yuanda Twanantak, Hednon Shem Sotri Hotat. Shata, is a Satonya, Satonya, is a Satonya, is a Satonya. Hayaki honking hasheron yaeron yontom kontatyam tenjoten Satonaron. Water Hanna Quatumsio Tensatonia Ronya is a Satonya Sonia is a Satonya is a Satonya is a Satonya. Chrétiens, prenez courage, sont ruinés. Quand ils chantent merveilleux à ces troublants apparats, ne prêtez plus l'oreille, Jésus est né. Jesus Antonia, Jesus Antonia. Oyez cette nouvelle dont un ange est porteur. Oyez, âme fidèle et dilatée au cœur. La Vierge dans l'étable entoure de ses bras l'enfant Dieu adorable, Jésus est né. Jesus Antonia, Jesus Antonia. Let Christian men take heart today, the devil's rule is done. Let no man heed the devil more, for Jesus Christ is come. But hear ye all what angels sing, how Mary made for Jesus King. Jesus Antonia, Jesus is born. Jesus Antonia, Jesus Antonia. Three chieftains saw before Noel a star as bright as day. So fair a sign, the chieftain said, shall lead us where it may. For Jesus, you told the chieftains three, that star will bring you here to me. Jesus Antonia, Jesus is born. Jesus Antonia, Jesus est né. Jesus is born. Jesus Antonia, Jesus est né. Jesus is born. So not only is it a period song, but it has heraldry in it. Oh yay! It took me, no, I'm serious. It took me a while before I realized what that was. I mean, I do speak French. I did all my schooling until I was 12 years old in French. But it's not a common vocabulary word unless you're into medieval stuff. And then, of course, later I discovered, hang on a second. Yeah, sweet. It's a heraldry song. Yeah. What have you got in there?
One of two choices.
Poacher? Or Selkie?
As I say, one of two choices.
But they're both on the list.
Yes. One of choices.
Choice! Whatever that is. Why don't we do Selkie? These two songs, we'll take a little break after this to eat more stuff.
Please eat the punch me, don't make me take them.
Oh, no, I'm gonna eat them all. I may have to fight people for these things. They was enough. That's true. Both of these songs that we could choose are written by one of my apprentices, and who I'm very privileged to have as part of my household. Emma McIden is a fantastic woman. I just love her to death. And her latest arts and science project is 5 years in the making. She has 2 daughters under the age of 5. And you can imagine she's kind of busy most of the time. So she gave us permission to actually perform these, and I'm really delighted that she did. This is a tale that she found inspired by the Scottish fairy stories. Now, the Scottish fairy folk are known as the Selkies. They look like seals during the day. They swim around in the ocean doing seal things, you know, eating fish, basking.
Fish.
Fish. But at night, if they choose, they can shed this beautiful seal skin that they wear, put it aside, and then walk out on the shore looking like you or I. And it's said even today in the Orkneys and the Hebrides, the Far Isles, that if there's a really lucky fishing family, it's probably because a Selkie woman shed her coat one day, came out on shore, married into the family, and just decided she liked it and stayed put. And that good luck has passed down through the bloodline, through the generations. Now, the female Selkies have that choice. If they take their sealskin off and thus, as long as no one touches it, as long as it stays well hidden, she can stay in human form as long as she chooses. She can live or die as a mortal woman if she wants. But a male Selkie does not have nearly that much fairy magic in him. He can shrug out of this sealskin, step out on shore, but if he's not back in the sealskin and back in the ocean by midnight, he dissolves away into nothing, and that's the end of it. So needless to say, if a male Selkie falls in love from afar with a fisherman's daughter on shore, they have to get a little more creative. Once a fair and handsome seal lord lay his foot upon the sand for to woo the fisher's daughter and to claim her marriage hand. I have come in from the ocean, I have come in from the sea, and I'll not go to the waves, love, lest you come along with me. Lord, long have I loved you as a Selkie on the foam. I would gladly go and wed ye and be lady of your home, but I cannot go into the ocean, I cannot go into the sea. I would drown beneath the waves, love, if I went along with thee. Lady, long have I loved you, I would have you for my wife. I will stay upon your shoreland, though it robs me of my life. I will stay one night beside you, never go back to the sea. I will stay and be thy husband, though it be the death of me. Here we go. Lord, I will not go and wed thee, just to watch my lover die. Since I'll not be left a widow, I have a plan for us to try. Let us speak with my grandmother, who's ever dwelt beside the sea. She may know some trick or treasure, that I may wed my fair Selkie. So they've gone to her grandmother's little cottage by the sea, to inquire how maiden might be wed to a Selkie. For the Selkie's fortune kingdom would surely rob her of her breath, but to stay on land past midnight, that would surely be his death.
Lord, I know not how to aid you. You may never live on shore, for your kind to live till dawning has ne'er been seen before. But my mother had a seal coat that she buried neath a tree, and she told me that its wearer would become a fair Selkie.
So they've journeyed farther inland, though the seal lord's getting weak, and she's shouldering the shovel to unearth the thing they seek. And at the rising of the full moon, underneath the elfin oak, she's unearthed that buried treasure of which her grandmother spoke. And just before the stroke of midnight, they have made it back to sea, and she's donned that magic seal coat and become a maid Selkie. They have gone into the ocean, hand in hand into the sea. She has gone along, a fair seal bride with her Selkie.
Take a break.
All the donuts.
All right, pass those donuts.